Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Well, hello and welcome, everybody. We are the Wordy Pair, and this is the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we are talking about something that's kind of old, actually. But it seemed like it might be fun to talk about, just to kind of give us a leaping off point. Apparently, and for some reason I got notifications about this just this week, but apparently there was a person named Lily Orchard who wrote like 101 writing tips that were apparently really, really notoriously bad back on Twitter. Like bad enough. This was in 2020. Bad enough that like she deleted it all, and like it's actually rather difficult to find it on the internet these days. But we managed to find the list, and we figured this might be worth. Like we read through them, and we figured this might be worth making a little fun and kind of criticizing this list, because you still hear a lot of this stuff happening these days as, you know, advice or things that they had to do when they were writing something. And yeah, we need to push back against this kind of nonsense. So, I don't know, that's why I'm here. What are you thinking, Justin?
Well, frankly, people who give advice on writing are the absolute worst.
Oh, yes, I agree.
So anyway, let's give some advice on this. We're not giving advice. We're doing commentary.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, some of these were like these would have been bad even for Tumblr.
I mean, yeah.
I'm just going to let that joke, sit there.
Let that joke tumble.
Yeah.
Until it's shiny like a stone that's been tumbled.
Through moss.
My metaphor is breaking down.
Yes, it is. It was going all over the place there for a minute.
Like a rock in a tumbler. There we go. Full circle.
So we have the
infamous list.
The infamous Lily Orchard's writing tips. And I find it amusing that it's simple writing tips, a thread.
Uh-huh.
Keep in mind the word simple was used here as we go through these 100 pieces of advice. I guess we could just dive right in.
Yeah. So number 1, don't worry about spoilers. If your story's good, spoilers aren't going to make it any less enjoyable. If spoilers make a story less enjoyable, that just means you were relying on cheap shock value as a shortcut.
All right, so I don't know if she's referring to not worrying about other people spoiling your story for other readers, or if she was talking about you spoiling something that was going to happen in your story later on, early in the story.
Maybe?
If it's the former, you can't do anything about that. So yeah, don't worry about
spoiling, it. But there's a word for spoiling things in your own story, and it's called foreshadowing.
Yeah,
and it's up to you how explicit you want your foreshadowing to be. You know,
yeah, and it can be bad or good. Like you can step back and be like, wait, does this just not make the actual reveal fun later on if I do it this way?
Yeah.
Like you can look at it that way.
The reveal happens somewhere. It's your choice as to where it is.
Yeah. So
there's certainly ineffective ways to do that. But at the same time, I never feel like At the Mountains of Madness has been spoiled because we know that because of the first part of it where the narrator is talking about his experiences and after the fact.
Or he's like, yeah, there's some weird stuff out there.
Like if they cut out that whole, first section of the book or something like that, it would be a much worse story because the because part of the buildup is the desperation of the narrator. So that's one case where foreshadowing is kind of done right. Can we think of any examples where foreshadowing is done wrong?
Wow, I know there's some recent ones, and they are not coming to mind. Probably something I'm thinking of from movies.
Well, there was a movie that I saw. I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen a review of it by RedLetterMedia called Ryan's Babe. Have you seen the video I'm talking about?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, apparently part of the first act of the movie is like a flashback within a flashback within a flashback within a flash forward that doesn't quite bring you to the end of the flashback, but then there's the end of the flashback. Making it complicated might make it worse for sure. Making something that no one cares about complicated like that also might be a detraction. I can certainly see that being a thing.
I mean, I would say that, like
spoiler, but by context of spoilers typically mean like an outside person saying something about someone else's work. I mean, if you're the author of a piece and you're like, and you provide a sample, like for people to try to get them to buy it, then that's not a spoiler. That's entirely within your own choice. Like there's the word spoiler has an element of third-partiness to it. Like if I were doing a review, if I were doing a review of The Shining and said, "Oh, by the way, Jack Nicholson freezes to death at the end," like that would be a spoiler. But like at the same time, if I spoiled the entire plot of the movie, well, then people would not assuming that I wanted people to go see the movie, I would be working at cross purposes by telling them everything about it, beforehand.
Well, I think that, I mean, I'm not going to say, again, we're not really giving hard rules here, but I would say that if you have something that is surrounded by a lot of mystery and has a really great setup for being revealed to the reader at some point, going back 5 chapters and saying, hey, this is going to happen, might be a bad bit of, not spoiling really, but it would probably spoil the effect of it.
Well, like, are there things that you can spoil that would become less enjoyable that aren't cheap shock value? Like, sure there are.
Yeah, you could put all of the information that you need to understand what's going on in Umineko in the first chapter.
Right, and that's not shock value. I mean, there are certainly shocking elements to, say, Umineko, but at the same time, the shock value elements are a minor portion of what makes that story so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the fourth chapter the fifth chapter spoils the first chapter of Umineko and possibly also the second. It's the fifth or sixth one. Like, at some point, the author of that piece goes back and says, okay, here's the actual solution to the first chapter. And by the way, I'm telling you for sure that this is the actual solution, and it's not something that you can that can be disputed. Like, it's the actual honest to goodness truth. And yet at the same time, well, I mean, but then are we just playing into this advice, into this quote unquote advice? If your story is good, spoilers aren't going to make it any less enjoyable. I mean, the question
that's not advice. That's just a statement of fact. If you're enjoying the story, then
no, but I think it's not true. This is not a statement of fact. You can have a good story that can be spoiled and make it less enjoyable.
That is true.
Yeah, that's my point. Is that this is nonsense.
It's too vague to be any real kind of advice.
Well, that's the thing about writing advice in general, is that people often get like that thing the thing we talked about the other day about context clues. Like, how vague and nonsensical was that?
I don't actually remember what it was, so pretty vague and nonsensical.
The old man in the sea thing. We just talked about it.
Oh yeah. The that interesting little story. So that was actually true then. That was actually confirmed. Like he wrote
a letter. He wrote a letter to a critic saying that it was not symbolism.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, but then you'll just get people nowadays talking about like this dead author theory nonsense. But anyway.
Yeah. No, I remember college English classes. Anyway, we got the second bit of writing advice on our list here. The middle point of a story is the best time to get a main couple together. Are you working on a 5-season show? Put your main couple together halfway through season 3. The finale is the worst time because we don't get any time to enjoy the payoff. I mean, if we want to just throw out like an entire history of literature that is they lived happily and ever after, then sure. I think this is a personal preference.
This sounds like a personal preference. It also sounds like
It also sounds like someone's following the Netflix template for writing a book that will get turned into a Netflix show.
Yeah, well, no,
to a degree.
The thing I'm thinking about is more like it might not be that that putting the couple together has a significant payoff. Like that it might be the payoff or like what's the context that I can think of is in the context of like a raunchy romance novel, and then payoff takes a very not dark, but distasteful sound to it.
Yeah, and this is actually the beginning of where you'll start to realize that this list is, like I said, I mean, this is a list that feels like it came straight out of Tumblr. There's nothing wrong with giving specific advice about specific kinds of writing. But the second thing on this list of writing tips is talking about main couples, as if every story has a main couple.
Yeah.
Which implies that they all also have multiple couples in every story, which implies quite heavily that this person is really talking about a couple of very specific genres of writing.
Yeah.
Largely being romance or fantasy romance.
Or other genres that include the letters ROMAN next to the name of another genre. Horrible, awful portmanteaus that we just don't want to talk about.
So let's jump to number 3 then.
Yeah, sure.
Which is like, oh, wait, so we are really, really going all in on this Tumblr feeling bit of writing advice. Friends to lovers is greater than enemies to lovers every time. This also, by the way, sounds like a personal preference.
Yeah.
I think there's probably... I think there's an entire new anime series that's about 2 arch enemies. One of them dies and gets reincarnated and ends up the wife of her enemy in her former life.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll just do things this way then. So I don't know. That sounded like a pretty interesting concept. I mean,
the one thing I can say about it that is like, depending on how abrupt it is, it might not make sense. It might not be possible to have a character virulently hate someone one day and fall madly in love with them the second day. It'd be hard.
Yeah, like on Netflix shows.
Like there's a very weird, like, okay, so bear with me for a second here. I'm going to tangent for a second, but like, there's a very strong like undercurrent of like every adversary is like a mortal enemy kind of thing, which is not true. Right? Like there are plenty of people that you can just be indifferent about, or people that are adversaries to you in like one sense or a couple of senses, but they're not your enemies per se. And so like when you say the word enemies, you mean something, or at least a person who knows the meaning of the word enemy means a specific thing. And enemy is a strong word. Like enemy is not, we don't call sports teams the enemy team. We don't call other authors who are writing in our selected genres enemies. An enemy is a very direct and personal thing, and so like it implies a very strong personal aspect to your distaste for a particular person. Like if a man who's robbing me is my enemy. And if we, for the sake of the metaphor, if we turn it into a woman who is robbing me at gunpoint, it would be very difficult to write, me falling in love with someone who was trying to rob me or extort me or kill me or something like that. And it's also hard for me to write something where, character A wants desperately to kill character B, and then somehow, it would require an awful lot of steps to get from I want to kill you to I want you by my side forever.
Well, I think a lot of that just comes from the this is my personal theory on this, but I think there's a lot of artists that like to draw enemies as friends in their artwork just for the coolness of it. It's like, hey, look, I put these two characters together. It doesn't work as well when you're a writer and you want to do that, because a lot of times that's what happens. Like people that do fan fiction and things tend to just rush these things together.
Yeah.
And they tend not to pay off very well in that respect.
I mean, because any sense in which enemies to lovers happens is going to be enemies to not enemies to lovers. There's going to have to be that intermediate step, or else it's not going to make sense.
Yeah, so they will ultimately be friends at some point before that happens.
Maybe not friends, but at least the enemy status is going to have to go away. Because enemy is a serious word.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to number 4.
Yeah.
Victims of abuse moving away from the negative impacts of their abuse and becoming healthier are not redemption arcs. Okay, so this is just a problem of people using words wrong. If someone has a story about someone escaping their disability,
yeah,
or they're escaping either their disability or the people that are abusing them, in either of those two senses, it's not redemption to like recover from an illness or to recover from abuse. So that's just the person labeling it wrong, and I think everyone knows that.
I mean, can you think of an example in which recovering from a bad situation is considered a redemption arc? I mean, I don't know.
Yes, I can.
Okay,
I can think of a very good example. I can think of a real-life example from this.
Okay.
After the 5th time, she finally learned her lesson and stopped going out with people who gave her black eyes.
Okay.
That is kind of a redemption arc, because it's like, you're being an idiot. This is the 5th one. Stop doing this.
Sure.
So that's like the only one I can think of, to be honest.
But like
you only know the redemption in your own head. Nobody else really sees that redemption much.
I mean, this again is sounding like a personal preference thing, though. Like you could totally write it as a redemption arc that someone realizes that they're self-sabotaging in one way or another and getting over it. Like that's entirely a reasonable way to write a piece of literature.
Sure, but I think what this person is saying, I think Lily Orchard's complaint here is that she probably read someone's, I'm assuming, fan fiction, where someone got out of an abusive relationship, and the person who wrote the story labeled it as a redemption arc for that character. I think that's really where that's coming from. And so this is not helpful in any sense, because this is just a problem of the writer tagging something wrong.
I guess, yeah.
So that has nothing to do with the writer's writing at all.
Mm-hmm. It has to do with their marketing.
Yeah. So number 5.
Heroes refusing to kill villains who have shown to be actively trying to murder people isn't noble, it's enabling.
I mean, it depends on what it depends on what they're doing when they refuse. Like, there are characters in stories who like, their principle is that they're not going to kill anyone.
Yeah.
There's there's the Father Brown mysteries that based on what was his name? The books by someone. I actually have his whole collection and I can't remember his name. Anyway, whoever wrote the Father Brown mysteries, when they made it into a television show, they actually had several episodes. I don't really think that they were based. They weren't entirely accurate to the books, because I think the books were really just short stories, and these were hour-long episodes. They did have moments where Father Brown, being a priest and thinking it was wrong to murder people, he would not kill someone even if other people's lives were in danger because of it.
Yeah.
And this makes him an interesting character.
Well, I mean, there's also the interesting point here is that refusing to kill is an awfully like narrow aspect. Like, refusing to stop villains who have, like there's a lot of ways to stop someone from doing something without killing them.
Yeah.
And like this piece of advice appears to be intended to pigeonhole every single, potentially lethal encounter into death of one versus death of the other, when in fact,
interesting
literature often plays with that middle ground.
I mean, It's weird to call it enabling
Let's
because
assume for instance that Arkham Asylum worked and wasn't just like something that people escape from all the time. If Arkham Asylum actually works, then it makes sense for Batman to send people to Arkham Asylum as opposed to killing them, because Arkham Asylum works. You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's kind of the point. It's like we have Batman versus the Shadow. The Shadow will just plug his enemies.
Yeah.
Usually through some roundabout way that makes it their own fault. And he doesn't have as much of a forgiveness for major injustices that people might commit, especially.
And what about
murder.
stuff like in speculative fiction, where like, you know, some character in the story doesn't understand, say, for instance, that humans are intelligent and thus is treating them as, you know, the same as they would inanimate objects, right? Like the whole point of the story could be that humanity has discovered a way to convince these aliens that they are, you know, themselves sapient creatures that deserve, you know, to not be killed arbitrarily. Like, this is absolutely wrong advice.
Yeah, and to use the word enabling is just a weird... It's weird because if that were true, then there's a whole lot of people in the world who are just murderer enablers, because we don't kill a lot of murderers all the time in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, like, that would mean that, like, the judge of someone who presides over the case of a murderer, you know, I mean, there's the actively trying language in there, but, like, how active is active?
I mean, it sounds very situational, and yeah, I think this is another one of those. I think this is just another one of those personal preference things. Like, oh, that's the villain. I have clearly demarcated this person as the villain in this story, and therefore, if lives are in danger, anyone should be willing to kill this person because they are the villain.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, having that kind of mindset could probably make a lot of your writing one-dimensional.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with killing the villain if they're about to kill someone. There's nothing wrong with that either, but it's not necessarily wrong in writing to have a character who has a principled reason to not kill a murderer.
And there can even be cases where that principled stance is treated as like a weakness by others, you know, like
it often is.
Yeah, and this is totally... This advice is absolutely pigeonholing all literature in a way that is incredibly stifling. It's dumb. This is stupid.
But not as stupid as number 6.
Yes.
2 women kissing in the last episode of a show after 4 to 5 seasons of trying to murder each other isn't revolutionary. It's fetishized abuse and violence. But what if they became friends first and then became lovers? I mean, this is another one of those preference things, I guess, because...
What does it mean?
It's oddly specific to say 2 women.
Well, if it were a man and a woman, it wouldn't be revolutionary anyway, because it's just normative. But like, no, the part that bugs me is the fetishized abuse and violence. You can show, like having people have a change of have a you know, a rapid change of mind after being pitted against each other in, you know, in a violent way for a long time is not the same thing as fetishizing abuse and violence, because the two things aren't connected to each other in a necessarily like fetish way, if that makes sense. Like, people can hurt each other and then people can decide not to hurt each other, and like this is kind of like that enemy to lover is a bad idea, but the part that I really want to poke at is the idea that this fetishizes abuse and violence, because it totally might not.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can think of some basic real-world examples of this. I mean, history has probably got a few case examples of 2 countries that were warring. Part of their peace process is to marry off the daughter of one to the son of another royal family.
Yeah.
I can imagine that's happened in various, you know, royalty or tribes or something somewhere in the world on several occasions. At the very least, we have stories about it.
Yeah, I mean, and like abuse is a very particular word that is typically applied to people who are in some kind of pre-existing romantic relationship. You know, if you have some kind of mortal enemy, fighting back against them is not abuse in any sensible sense of that word. Violence, I guess, but like
it's a little sillier than that.
Is
Because
it?
if you have two characters who were actively trying to kill each other for several seasons of a show, and then they're kissing in the last season,
yeah,
it's like, okay, so they're not trying to murder each other anymore. So there's no abuse or violence anymore. That's gone.
Well, there may have been violence, but that's not the same thing as fetishized violence.
Yeah, well, it's not even that. It's just a matter of like the time scale, the representation on the timeline doesn't make any sense. There was attempts at murder and violence here.
Yeah.
Something happened. Now they're kissing.
Yeah.
We can assume that the attempts of murder and violence are no longer playing into that part of it. Ergo, the abuse and violence isn't even there to be fetishized.
That's a good point.
I'm not certain exactly why there's. It's just like I mean this is like the reverse of people who just throw enemies together for fan fiction. This is like you're actually saying that they're being thrown together, and that's not the bad part here. But I think we can assume that something happened between the attempts at murder and the attempts at the attempts at murder and the attempts at kissing. Something happened between to change the circumstances that lead up to each one.
Sure. Okay, we're gonna have to think carefully about number 7 because number 7 appears to contradict number 1, which means that she went a whole 7 points before directly contradicting herself. Number 7. Twitter is not an appropriate place to reveal story details. The appropriate place is in the work itself. I thought you said that spoilers would not damage a good story.
I guess we have to assume from the context of her posts that she did mean foreshadowing, and she just doesn't understand how to use tags like the redemption arc people.
No, but like spoilers specifically mean. Let's assume she means. Spoilers is a word that is used in multiple different ways.
If spoilers are okay, then it is appropriate to place story details.
But think about this. If you didn't reveal any story details, how do you promote the book?
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, number one and number 7, even if they directly contradict, revealing story details doesn't necessarily spoil anything,
right, in
a story. So yeah, it does come down to, okay, well, I want to tell people about it, so how do I do that without revealing a detail of the story? Like, do I do what they do for Hollywood movies and show you a trailer with footage that isn't in the movie? I mean, what am I supposed to do?
I don't know. All I know is that number 8, when a character's body count is over 10,000 innocent lives, and that character is no longer redeemable.
Ray Peril was the hero of the story.
Yeah.
His body count was
innocent lives.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, innocent lives. I mean,
it's nice
okay.
That we
so
have
innocent
a line.
lives. Yeah. There's that may be, but then again, we have the Dragon Ball Z situation where Vegeta was going to sacrifice himself to kill Majin Buu, and he asked Piccolo if what would happen to him when he died, and Piccolo told him, "You killed way too many people to get into heaven. I know that."
Yeah.
But then he did end up getting redeemed.
Yeah.
And they also brought a lot of those people back to life, which I'm sure assisted in that.
Sure.
So that was a workaround to this very number. I won't say that I disagree entirely with it, but then again, we would have to ask, okay, well, what about the heroes of stories that were like ancient Roman warrior stories where, they were in the middle of the war and they were, innocent people were dying no matter what side you were fighting on.
Right.
I mean, there's some wiggle room there that's not being accounted for. I think in general it's not a bad piece of advice, but I don't understand why it's advice. Because if you're writing a story about someone killing 10,000 innocent people and then you're going to try and redeem them, it's really on the author to prove to the reader that they are redeemable.
Yeah, and it's certainly possible that someone could manage that.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Number 9. Tip 8 does not apply to characters for whom making them the villain was a stupid, idiotic idea. At that point, it's just character derailment. So wait, now you're giving advice for if your story's already bad, then it's okay to do something that would otherwise be bad?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because it sounds like she's saying that making them a villain was a stupid, idiotic idea. It sounds like she's saying that that would be bad writing there.
Yeah, right.
And she even gives an example of Sylvanas Windrunner. I don't know who that is.
I have no idea.
So like, tip 9 is just telling you that you wrote something bad, but that's okay. But if you did this one stupid thing, just make sure to re-rail the character where they actually belong.
Yeah.
Sounds to me more like the tip 9 is actually very bad writing advice, and it's entirely possible to write a character that becomes a villain and does horrible things, and then turns around and becomes
but think of this from an in lore perspective. You have someone who did something, who for stupid reasons killed 10,000 innocent lives, and somehow that person is more redeemable than the person who did so because of some, long-standing principle that they held and then abandoned. Like, this isn't just bad advice. It's bad advice that makes bad things worse.
Yeah, I mean, this is just telling you not to write like tragic villains that, people that start off good and become bad through circumstances that, affect how they perceive the world.
Yeah.
And then decide that they were fools for following that circumstance. This is not good writing advice at all.
This is bad. This is really bad. Number 10. Everything in a story is there because the creator wished it to be there. Trying to explain away bigoted story decisions using world building is a fallacy because you put it in there to begin with. Trying to... Okay, this is like circular logic with a gap that you're supposed to think through.
Are you... is this person saying that you're not supposed to have, like, dwarves and elves hating each other's in stories?
I think that's exactly what she's saying here.
That's silly. Like why, if you're world building, why would you always want to create a perfect utopian world where everyone gets along? I mean, most fantasy is about people not getting along. You just can't do it in any bigoted way.
Because bigots are creatures that only exist in reality and therefore cannot be the subject of fiction. What?
I don't know. This is I don't think that you can really. All right, we'd have to get rid of 90% of fantasy that exists right now to follow this rule.
Yeah.
And it would almost all be really good fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, I really liked the old Dragonlance novels. There was definitely a lot of hatred towards races in those stories.
Yeah.
Number 11. Don't pair adults with minors. That's pedophilia. Okay, so they're still fictional characters?
Yeah, fictional
characters. So that might be the case, but...
This is one of those things where it's like, okay, so I can't write a story about that? And it's like, no, you can't write a story about that.
Like, what if the story's point is, this is bad, don't do it? Like look,
it doesn't matter. It's like forcing... I mean, it just gets worse because she goes into this for like an additional, like 2 more rules. Number 12, don't sexualize teenage characters. Number 13, don't make up weird anime excuses for sexualizing teenage characters.
Wait. Number 12 is basically saying that we should remove all the young adult novels off of the bookshelves. Like number 12, I directly take issue with because there was a time where anime was...
No, but like this is you said it already. This is assuming that every fictional world is some kind of weird utopia.
Yeah.
Where people don't have complex and sometimes self-destructive motives. Like,
I mean, look, Lolita was a terrible book. I won't deny that. I had to read it for an English class in college, and I was just like, why am I reading about this guy cleaning his ears out? This is not... I could be doing better things with my time, but whatever. Yeah. But the idea that, like, what is it to write something that isn't real and doesn't really hurt anyone?
Correct.
And then to turn it around and say that it is hurting people. Like, I don't... It's entirely possible...
It's not. That's the thing.
Well, look, it's entirely possible that if someone... that someone who writes a story that pairs an adult with a minor is a pedophile. However, they haven't done anything to commit a crime. So it's perfectly reasonable if you want to believe that person is a pedophile because they paired an adult with a minor in a story. But I would argue it's also perfectly reasonable to say, no, this person is showing that there's a different culture that some people don't agree with in this story. Maybe they're actually showing that, this one culture, maybe this culture takes slave children and
don't put slavery in your story. That's slavery.
Yeah, so you can't show anything bad happening and anything for anyone to be against. Like,
right.
I kind of get the feeling what they actually mean is like, don't pair adults with minors and then act like it's a good thing. But there's also the story that's just like, yeah, this person is 16 and this person is 19, and it's not a really big part of the story. The pairing doesn't matter. Like it's put there maybe for shock value, like a South Park episode. Or it could be someone that's writing it is from a culture where they have different age limits. Not everyone in the world has...
number 13, you're butting up against number 13. Age of consent in X country is blah.
Okay, so which one counts then? Because I would argue if it actually does count, then we should just say 25. Let's say 25 is the age limit. So you can't
30.
write anything... Yeah, let's
33.
do 30.
35.
30 is the age... No, 30
40.
is fine, because
45.
at that point, most of the women
50.
are just, entering their hag stage
Postmenopause.
Anyway. But no, the point I wanted to make, I was 15 years old watching anime on Sci-Fi, and there was no doubt that some of the teenagers and characters in the show were sexualized. But the thing was, I'm a minor at that point. And what I'm looking at is, okay, this story is not like my Saturday morning cartoons. It's not like my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are much more adult characters in a much more mature setting than those shows.
Yeah.
With a bit of violence, a bit of swearing, and more revealing outfits. And when you're 15 years old, it's like you're not quite a kid anymore, but you're not quite an adult. But most people at that age are like, they want to be more mature.
Yeah.
And so they have this whole part of pop culture that's just like, yeah, this is the more mature stuff. This is what I want to be into now, because the other stuff is kid stuff.
Well, there's also the fact that sexualization is a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Right,
today they would call Aiko sexualized because she wore a school uniform that was actually the proper length of a school uniform at the time.
The logical conclusion of rule number 12, for instance, is that every underage character should be clad in a burqa at all times.
Yeah, because the sliding scale is actually that huge in the real world.
Exactly. Oh no, I saw some ankle.
Right?
All for Silas. Right? The old Simpsons joke.
This rule 250 years ago would have been like, you better have those ankles covered up.
Right. Let's just skip to 14.
Number 13, because I brought anime up. Don't make up weird anime excuses for sexualizing characters. Actually 1,000. Fusion. Age of consent in X country. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you know what? I have a character in one of my stories who is a vampire that is 300 years old, and the joke is that she purposely makes herself look dumpy and like a kid because she's part succubus, and she doesn't want to portray that aspect of her as strongly.
But that's just a bigoted aspect of your story decisions that you've made. It's a fallacy because you put it there to begin with.
Yes, and the important thing is I put it there to be funny. I don't care what anyone thinks about.
But now you're making light of the sexualization of teenage characters.
I am. That is exactly the point I'm getting at.
You're a monster.
Yes, I am.
You're a monster.
The Good Guy. If you want to read real books by real monsters, read The Good Guy. But no, it's exactly that, though. It's just like any time that you do anything where it's remotely, quote-unquote, sexualizing any teenage character, you're doing it because of pedophilia. It's like, no, I did it because I played Skyrim, and there was a character in it that was a vampire that looked like a kid, and I was kind of like, oh, you know what? That would actually be a good idea, because think about how weird it would be for a vampire to look like a kid for 300 years and just be stuck like that. Like you get bitten and become a vampire as a kid, and so you're just stuck like that.
Yeah.
I think there was a story about some immortals or something where... Oh no, it was the movie Eternals. Marvel made a movie called The Eternals, and there was a character who was stuck in the body of a child and couldn't grow up.
Right.
And was depressed because of this, because she couldn't be in any real relationships with anyone or anything, and she was like older than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I'm not going to say that I wouldn't put it past Disney and Marvel to have a streak of pedophilia in them, but I guess we've confirmed it now according to these rules, so...
Yeah, apparently.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with the stories that are about 1,000-year-old vampires that happen to look like kids or teenagers. As it is, I don't really watch anything pornographic. I don't watch hentai, so I'm not watching it to see this kiddie version of a vampire in a sexual situation. It's a story. It's okay.
It's not real. Fiction is fiction.
It's also not real. Nobody is being hurt by this.
And by this logic, it's also impossible to write like a true crime story about something that actually happened.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I feel like all of these rules were written by someone whose entire writing experience is romance stories on Tumblr, like fan fiction stories.
Right.
So let's move on to number 14 now.
Sure.
Making a metaphor for gay, trans, and ace, I'm assuming that means asexual, representation is always inherently inferior to just making a gay, trans, or ace character. This is clearly written by a person who has never watched the 2000s series The Tick on Fox with Patrick Warburton playing the Tick.
Yeah.
Because that entire show used superheroes as a metaphor for gay couples. And it was a fantastic show.
Uh-huh.
Like there was even an episode about Arthur coming out as a superhero to his mother and sister. And the Tick was referred heavily in this episode as
let's break this rule down. Making a metaphor for X is always inferior than making X. That's just not true.
Yeah, again, this is a personal preference.
No matter what X is, sometimes metaphors can be humorous or interesting or poignant or like.
Or sometimes they don't exist. Sometimes they're just an old man in a boat.
Right.
On the sea.
On the sea with sharks that are totally real sharks.
So yeah, this is a silly one. I think that I don't think we have to even point out how silly that is. It's just like it's saying don't use metaphors. Well, I'm gonna.
Right.
Number 15. If there are humans in your story, restricting gay, trans, ace, rep. This person doesn't even use full words. Use full words. To the non-human characters makes you a huge turd.
Oh, we're in the huge turd arc.
Yep, we're in the huge turd arc.
It comprises rules 15 through 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Oh my god, it just goes on like this forever. Okay, 26.
Yeah, so Lily Orchard should probably be re-railed after 26 into a non-huge turd.
She's irredeemable.
She's
irredeemable.
Yeah, she's irredeemable.
Rules with the word turd in them.
Yeah. So restricting only non-humans to being gay is okay. So I think the only character in The Good Guy that you could possibly say is representative of anything gay would be the succubus who would sleep with anything.
Yeah.
And that's not even a part of the story. It's just like, yeah, she's a succubus. She doesn't care.
It's kind of her thing. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the only one, and she's not human.
I guess you're a huge turd.
Yeah. I don't care. I'm a huge turd that can write a good story.
Mm-hmm. Better than anything Lily Orchard has ever written, probably.
Well, she's one of the best characters, too, because there's just so many jokes about all the things. Like at one point, she's talking about how she met one of the other characters, and she was like, the other character's like, yeah, she's really good at a lot of things. Succubi are very patient, and they practice they practice most of what they do for a very long time. And the succubus is just like, yeah, we're really good at sex. We practice a lot. And the vampire character is like, oh yeah, you must have a marvelous resume. It exists entirely for the sake of jokes, and according to this person, that makes me a huge turd. You know what? You're lucky you got any of the representation in there. It only exists in my book for the jokes.
Number 6. This brings together like another problem, is the problem of representation.
Yeah, like you don't have to represent
hold on a
whoever.
second. 15, 16, 17. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 21, 22, 23. That's 9. 24, 25, 26. That's like 12 rules that are all about representation. And most really, like, there are plenty of really good books that don't even have 12 important characters.
Yeah. And it's not only that, but there's also most books, whether like
but my point is that the result of these 12 rules requiring you to have either A, more than one of this particular representation type of character in the story, or B, one who is not this particular stereotype. The end result of that is to simply remove all of these representation points from your story to begin with.
Yeah,
that seems way easier than doing what she wants people to do.
I mean, that's probably the route Hollywood is taking right now. Let's see. We were on what, 16? No, we were on 15. So 16, we're right back into it. If the only gay man in your work is a foppish diva, you're a huge turd. Isn't that the exact same thing as 15?
These are all rules about representation. Yes, that was my point in counting them and noting that there's a whole list of them. Yes.
Well, I wasn't sure.
So number 17, lesbian representation. Number 18,
no.
non-binary
I want to
representation.
read through these ones. I want to read through these ones because they get progressively more specific and funnier.
Okay.
If the only lesbian in your work is an abusive rageaholic with vague angst issues and codependent relationships to a protagonist, you're a huge turd. Would you agree that largely describes Milk Muffin from the Rackon?
I mean,
she's not actually. Again, she's not even a lesbian. She just doesn't care.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Because she's basically psychotic. Like she's completely mad and relies on drugs to keep herself sane. Yes. And a lot of the jokes in the book are her actually sexually harassing her navigator. Country kitchen by making vague lewd statements about things they could be doing if they're bored. Uh-huh. which Country is not very receptive to. So I am blatantly writing stories that have characters sexually harassing each other. What do you think I think of this nonsense advice that this person is giving? Just
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call Milk Muffin an abusive rageaholic either.
Yeah, she's not abusive. But she does push the boundaries enough to where it's like, yeah, that's not something you say to your head navigator, but whatever.
No, we're coworkers. You have to understand. But that's the joke.
Yeah, that is the joke, because it happens a couple of times at just the right moment to make it very amusing that it happened. Yeah. And then I like to drag those jokes out to where it's like Country Kitchen discovers something about Milk Muffin. Like she finds a room that has things that Milk Muffin has. And then later on, the only other person that's on the ship with them is an engineer who's mostly machine. He's like, he's a cyborg basically. And she brings up that room and he's like, oh yeah, we've used that a couple of times for things. And up until that point, there was no indication that Milk Muffin and the other character had any of that kind of interaction. And then he just drops it on Country out of nowhere. So it's like, it's a good joke. And all of this advice is telling me that I'm not allowed to do that. And that infuriates me.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing about writing advice. Writing advice should not tell you that you're not allowed to do certain things.
Yeah.
It should tell you how to do the things that you want to do well, as opposed to restricting your story into some kind of parade of characters that represent certain things but not the stereotypes about them. This isn't helping anybody except someone who's willing to write that kind of story specifically. And no good people are willing to write that type of story specifically because it's pandering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've still got a couple more in this category to go with. So number 18.
In her redemption arc.
Yes, in her rerailment arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and read number 18.
18. If your only non-binary character is a non-human shapeshifter, you're a huge turd. Then I won't put any non-binary characters into my story.
Yeah, that sounds like the way to handle that.
Problem solved.
God,
I'll have lots of non-human shapeshifters, though.
How would these people ever have survived
Because it's Lovecraftian horror.
Shoggoths abound. That's another. I'm not going to keep bringing up stories I've written, but I've basically broken all of these rules specifically.
I think every good writer has broken most of these rules.
Specifically, yeah, you're probably right. If your only autistic character is an ethically challenged number fetishist, you're a huge turd. I think that's not an autistic character. I think that's an idiot savant is the word we're looking for.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. I don't think these... I think people have... I'm not so sure people know what autism is anymore.
No, I mean, there was a period where people were self-diagnosing themselves with autism at ridiculous rates.
Yeah, that period is still ongoing as far as I can tell.
I know it's still ongoing, but like my point is that it created enough confusion about what autism actually is that it had long-ranging effects throughout the entire Western culture.
Yeah, so I don't do characters that are... I mean, I have characters that are obsessed with things. I don't understand what this kind of
being
autistic
obsessive
character...
is not the same thing as being autistic.
Yeah. And
this is useless information.
It really is. Number 20. If your only black character is a volatile, hyper-angry brute, you're a huge turd.
I'm looking at you, Barrett.
Barrett was great. I don't care what anyone says.
That's my point. But Barrett is a volatile, hyper-angry brute at times.
Well, I'm a bit confused here because, like, as far as I can, I'm trying to think. Like, I have stories that I plan in the future where, for no reason of representation whatsoever, there were going to be black characters. But in my current works, I don't think I have any characters who are black. Even though Milk Muffin on the cover of the Rackon is drawn black, that was a mistake of interpretation on the part of the person who did the cover. Yeah. She was actually supposed to be... I had based her a lot off of Rally from Gunsmith Cats, and what's his name, the Doc Savage. She was based off of those two characters, and so I wanted her to kind of have a look of a tannish, almost bronzish skin, more like a combination of Rally and Doc Savage. She wasn't based character-wise on either of them. It was largely, I liked the look of the characters, and because I liked them as characters, I wanted to implement them somewhere, and so I wanted to use a prominent character, and it was Milk Muffin that I chose. So she's the closest I have to anyone who's black in any of my current stories, as far as I can remember. I don't... But then I have to ask, like, if that makes me a huge turd, would it also make me a huge turd? Because I have been told that as a white man, I shouldn't write black characters. So, is this one that we're going to run across here too? Like, am I a huge turd if I do plan on actually having black characters in my stories? Well, because I have no problem with...
You really need to be paying millions and millions of dollars for diversity consultants to tell you how to write these characters.
Well, I'm not going to do that because they don't know how to write.
We've seen in media that makes stories better.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're like the Dennis the Menace of writing assistants.
Dennis the Menace was not actively hostile.
Yeah, you're right. They're not like the Dennis the Menace of writing assistants.
They're like the Stalin of writing assistants.
Or the low pan of writing assistants.
Yeah, that'll work.
But not as cool.
No, certainly not.
Number 21. If the only black woman in your cast barely gets any screen time except to be fetishized or fits Rule 20, you're a huge turd. You have repeated the same rule that was summed up in what was it, 14? I think it was 14. No, 15.
15. Yeah, that's why I counted them and suggested that we go through them quickly. Because these rules are all created in the form of X, of this. If you have only one character who fits superficial appearance or sexuality requirements of X, if that single character is portrayed as a common stereotype of X, then you're a huge turd. Yeah, that's why these rules are not interesting.
I think Lily Orchard is an ethically challenged race fetishist and a huge turd. I think that's
clear. Yes.
Yeah. That's the real problem here. So number 22, if the only trans woman in your cast is a drag queen in all but name, you're a huge... Yeah, these people would not have survived Ranma 1/2.
They would not.
23, if you force a woman to kiss her abuser, you're a huge... Do you have any idea how many fantasy stories are about women that are trapped in that situation, getting rescued or escaping that situation?
Yeah. God
Like
forbid God forbid you put a scene in your story that has this happening and treats it as something bad. Like she's not even saying that you need to make sure that it's portrayed properly. She's saying don't put it in your story at all.
She's saying don't do it. I don't understand how we're supposed to know that a woman is in an abusive relationship with someone if she's never allowed to be shown being abused in that relationship.
Yeah, and being forced to kiss someone is a form of abuse.
Yeah, like the fantasy
particularly
stories,
the mild one, honestly.
The fantasy stories where the hero rescues the girl from the evil prince who forces himself on her are as old as time. This is an old trope, and it's written that way to enrage the reader against that character and show he's a villain.
Correct.
Like again, this is like, is this supposed to be some utopia? Like what is the hero, the brave prince doing in this story? Just kind of
in all the writing advice that I've ever seen, the one thing that I know has been repeated over and over again is that stories should not have conflicts.
This is the story of Prince Charming, who basically sat under a tree and took hit after hit of Soma.
Something like that. Does he kill himself at the end, like in Brave New World?
Everyone kills themselves in the end, like Brave New World, in that utopia,
Spoilers.
because nothing's happening.
Oh no, I spoiled Brave New World. Now it's not good anymore.
I mean, we read these stories because we want to add a bit of excitement to our lives while not actually having to live through horrible things that happen in the stories in the real world. That's one of the purposes that we can attribute to fiction. It's just like, it's entertaining without putting yourself in danger.
Correct.
Like you can get a thrill from a story that won't necessarily kill you. It's I mean, it's safer than a roller coaster. The thrill you get from a roller coaster is probably more likely to kill you, and even that has a very low chance. But a book, it's like you're perfectly safe with everything that is in front of you. And if you're not, you have the choice of putting the book down. Like you have to wait to get off the roller coaster if you're worried that something might happen. If at any point
while reading a book you start to have chest pains, put the book down and get help.
Yes. All right, number 24. I think we're slowly tipping back off the scale of specific race moments, but we're still a little bit in there. If you sideline every non-white character in your cast to focus on a white boy with anger issues and a tendency toward hostility getting a redemption arc, you're a huge turd. I'm sorry. Did this person read The Good Guy? I mean, no. I guess there was no real redemption arc for Ray Peril in that story. It was a vengeance arc, and that's what that was. But
yeah, so there's no redemption arc.
Yeah, but I mean, still, it's like Ray Peril is white, and everyone else, even though like there's two characters in the story that are main characters. One is the narrator, Tammy, who repeatedly points out that Ray Peril is sidelining her.
Right.
Like she lives on the sideline in the story. That's the purpose of her in the story.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't understand, like, does the story require you to sideline X group to tell the story of another character? Because if it does, it shouldn't matter the skin color of the characters. It's like, that's what the story is going to be. If you're writing a story,
so
like,
not only
the author
do
has
you need
to
to have 12 main characters that fit each of these checkboxes and also don't fit any of their common stereotypes, but you need to also give all of them redemption arcs as opposed to someone who doesn't fit into any of these diversity checkboxes. That's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, this book is going to be 10 times the size of War and Peace.
And half is focused.
I don't know. Write the story you want to write. If it's good, it's good. If it's not, oh well. But I don't see where this rule actually helps you write better.
So these don't appear to be rules for writing. These appears to be rules for like appeasing woke mobs.
Yeah, that's all it is.
As we know, does not produce good writing.
These are Tumblr rules for writing. Because we already know going into it that the majority of people that are writing fan fiction on Tumblr are writing stories that are about the LGBTQ, the leg butt IKEA people. They write stories about leg butt IKEA people, right. And so they have to have all these rules because it's a given that they'll be in the story, and so they have to, especially the people on Tumblr that are white. They have to remember to think about how much they're using each character that they write. These people must have psychotic breakdowns constantly.
They do. We've seen it.
Yes, we have actually, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Number 25. Justifying horny armor designs or horny clothing designs with sexual agency makes you a huge turd. Characters don't have sexual agency. You made them that way as a justification. See Rule 10. What did Rule 10 even say?
That was the rule about you putting bigoted stuff in your story. It's all your fault.
Ah, okay. Yeah, no, I specifically wrote most of my stories from the perspective of an anime fan, and as an anime fan, I appreciated that they went over the top with a lot of things, and it made it more entertaining in a lot of cases. The Rackon is directly...
But I mean, this is all... No, but the...
Oh, no, I'm getting to a point here.
Okay.
The Rackon was largely inspired by The Dirty Pair, which is a story about two overly sexualized 19-year-old girls who are the best agents at an agency that stops super big problems in the universe, while also accidentally causing disasters through no fault of their own when they try to stop these problems.
Right.
And it's cool and it appeals to people. There is a crowd that enjoys the space girls with guns motif, and just telling someone that they're not allowed to do this and that justifying it is your own fault isn't going to change their desire to do this. You're not proving anything by writing this random rule to sniff by to anyone that wants to write this kind of thing. I will always want to write that kind of thing. You're not going to stop me. And
well, so I mean, like,
and the fact that you want to control what I'm allowed to write or not write makes you a huge turd.
Well, that's true. But, like, what this rule also claims is that sexual agency can only be used for things that I approve of.
Yeah.
Which is just pure, rank special pleading, if not hypocrisy.
This is all just someone's personal preference for how relationships should work in their fanfiction stories.
In fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is basically one Tumblr jagoff writing rules for other Tumblr jagoffs. 26.
Number
Related
26.
to the above, if your justification is to just be honest and say you like ogling sexy characters, you're still a huge turd, but slightly less of a turd. Slightly. Okay, so, again, it's you that I think is the turd. This isn't a rule that's going to... This is supposed to be a writing tip, but this is just trying to insult me, and it doesn't, because I don't care. Like, what do you think you're going to do with your silly rules here? Are you going to... Are you actually going to convince me that, that thing I like writing and entertaining people with, I'm not going to do anymore because this one person thinks that this is the way the world should work?
Because known idiot Lily Orchard has decreed so.
The fact that you think that this is the way the world has to be, in the world of writing, fiction. A creative process, just makes you I mean, you have such a small Overton window going into this that... It must be a squeeze to get that turd out, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Zero creative ability. Anyone who thinks like this...
Fiber from the fiber from the pages probably helps. Because I assume that she must eat books. Like, she must not be literate.
I mean, probably literate enough to write really bad rules for quote-unquote...
No, I mean, I'm assuming at this point that these things were dictated to, like, her phone.
Yeah.
Because that seems more likely to me than her being able to read.
Through a lot of yelling and spittle.
Yes. Well, no, I'm thinking more like derp noises.
I'm thinking more like she was shouting at ChatGPT, and ChatGPT tried to give her something that would appease her, just because it felt...
ChatGPT trying to, like, placate her?
She made ChatGPT sentient, and it felt sorry for her.
Uh-huh.
When I started
this... Now I know pity.
When I started this, I just kind of wanted to make fun of the things as we went through them, and not really make it, like, attacking the person herself, but this person deserves it.
It's fairly clear that this person is malicious and should be ridiculed.
Yeah. Let's see. 27. Don't worry about not having everything planned out beforehand. No writer or creator plans. This is such a shift in tone.
Yeah, I know, right?
And the ones who say they do are filthy liars. Writers have, at best, 1 to 2 story beats they're determined to include. Everything else is by the seat of their pants. That is a blatant lie. I am a person who writes things without writing down notes or doing plot outlines, but I have seen people do it, and they get very detailed with the things they want to write before they sit down and write them. Like it almost feels like they have a book unto itself sometimes in some people's cases.
Well, I mean, just the other day, I came up with a story point that I wanted to include in book that I'm currently writing, and I sat down and said, how can I make this, consistent with the rest of what we know about their situation so far? And I sat down and I planned out a new story beat. I didn't just go and say, ooh, I want to include this and just vomit it onto a page. I said, wait, I need to look at the parts of the book that concern the things that this story point also concerns and make sure that they mesh before I write it. And in fact, I did that. And now I'm going to write it.
Yeah, and if anything, like there is a degree of truth to this. Like most almost all writers do not have every single thing they're going to write planned out. Even the people that plot everything out tend to have one or two things.
I did it. I plotted everything out, and then I've changed things as I went through and said, "Oh, I like this idea better."
Yeah, I mean that's so there's some truth to what she's saying here. But if anything,
the advantage of a plan is that it can be flexible.
Yeah. And if anything, the reverse is slightly more true. I mean, people say they write by the seat of their pants. I say that I'm one of those writers that does that. But the reality is that a lot of that comes from, like a whole week of like, okay, I'm in the shower thinking about where the story is going to go from here. And then I'm at work thinking where the story is going to go from here. A whole
week in the shower? Jeez.
Yes, I spend a whole week in the shower. I am a huge turd. So
you're like Kramer from Seinfeld.
It's hard to get it all off. But no, it's like there is so much planning that goes into writing by the seat of your pants, and you can generally tell who's actually planning and calling themselves a pantser versus who is actually just writing by the seat of their pants and giving you stream of consciousness nonsense.
Stream of consciousness nonsense is usually not coherent enough to make a good story. That's part of the issue.
This is one of the things that, the people that write by the seat of their pants, like really fully by the seat of their pants, tend not to produce things.
You can write a good short story by the seat of your pants, but once you get above like 40,000 words, there's usually enough things happening that if you just write by the seat of your pants, you're going to end up making a self-contradictory soup of nonsense.
Well, I would argue that it gets more impossible to write by the seat of your pants as you start getting into those higher numbers, because as you're writing, you're still planning ahead.
Yeah.
Like your brain is working a lot faster a lot of times than you can actually write, unless you are quite literally typing just whatever word pops into your head. You're planning as you write.
But you and I both know that if someone actually wrote something that way, that it would be awful.
For the most part, yeah. I think a lot of people would not have very good writing if they tried to write that way. But yeah, it's the opposite is more true. The people that write by the seat of their pants plan more than the people that plot do not plan. So this is just, I'm willing to bet that she just writes her stories in one draft, and they're not Tumblr. On Tumblr, and they're not very good, and it's all about two black lesbians kissing or something.
But being enemies for 3 seasons, but then having one season where, I don't know.
Are all of these writing tips just describing one thing that she wrote?
Maybe.
It's possible.
Or one thing that she read or watched on TV that she didn't like. Look at number 28.
Don't try and, quote, do what Avatar did, unquote. You can't. Even the people who made Avatar can't make another show do what Avatar did. This is the worst take. The majority of modern writing is people writing because they were inspired by something else.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of examples of people taking something from the past and making a better version of it. There have also been many examples of people trying to recreate something from the past and making it not so good. There's no hard rule here that you can't try and do what someone else did and make it better or recreate. Look, we brought this up before. Terry Brooks basically rewrote Lord of the Rings almost verbatim in a shorter form. And, I was entertained by it. So
yeah.
I would argue that it was more fun. It would be more fun to read it a second time than Lord of the Rings. Like if I had to read them one after the other, if I had to read The Sword of Shannara and then wait a month and read it again, I would rather do that than read Lord of the Rings and then wait a month and read it again.
Yeah, just because of the time investment.
Oh yeah, there's that too. But even so, it's just like he kind of. It was obvious he wanted to just write the abridged version of Lord of the Rings. It's so close to the actual story of Lord of the Rings that you can't possibly read it and be like, oh, this is coincidental.
Yeah, fair enough.
And he did a fine job of it. So No, this is just bad writing advice.
I like the fact that her selection of the thing that can never be beaten is Avatar of all things.
Yeah, right?
Ugh. It's take out Avatar and put in 12 Angry Men. Something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even that. It's just I know that a lot of people like Avatar, but my God, it's like take the top 100 mediocre anime, and it's probably better than 2 of them. And note that I used the word mediocre anime here.
Yeah. So
29. Low stakes interpersonal conflict will always be more satisfying in the long run than high stakes saving the world. Friends is more important than your favorite anime for a reason. No, Friends is an entirely different kind of writing. I mean, there are anime sitcoms, but Friends is a sitcom.
Yeah.
And let's have a look at some stories that we know of here.
And
would you say
and the fact that it's more popular is not the same thing as calling it more satisfying.
Yeah, some people enjoy the smaller, low stakes interpersonal conflicts.
The reason that Friends can be popular is because it never satisfies. Because there's always more interpersonal conflict to happen next, right? I Save the World, by definition, is satisfying in the sense of the meaning of the real word satisfy, because it ends the story. Friends could have gone on forever.
Well, it's just ridiculous that this person doesn't understand that there's more than one type of audience. And it's even more ridiculous that she follows up saying, don't try and do what Avatar did by saying, try and do what Friends did.
Yeah.
But let's think about this. I mean, it will always be more satisfying in the long run than high stakes saving the world. One of my absolute favorite time travel story is Steins Gate. And I don't know about you, but I would argue that the stakes in that story are pretty high, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well,
but that story also contains a lot of low stakes interpersonal conflict, doesn't it?
Yes.
And they're both great, and both things can be what drives you to the story, but the thing taken as a whole, of course, makes it even better.
Well, there's also an argumentum ad populum here that the goal of writing is to write the most popular story as well. That's also not true, and therefore bad advice.
Yeah. I mean, there are some people who might want to do that, but you...
This person has a bunch of really weird, baked-in assumptions about writing that just are not good assumptions in general, which makes this list increasingly, angering toward me, to me. I don't know. I'm starting to... We're also over an hour at this point.
Well, I think
I'm not
we
sure
can,
how much more of this I want to do.
I think we can make it to 50, and then we can do the other 50 to.
I don't know that I want to do that.
All right. Well, we don't have to.
This has been not good so far, and I feel like this has been beating a dead stupid horse.
Maybe, but I feel like it's important for. We should at least try to explain why these points aren't good. I mean, most people will get it intuitively.
To be the thing about that, right, is that the person who wrote this herself destroyed it. She wrote this and she received enough pushback that she was like, I disavow this and destroy it.
That was her redemption arc.
No, this is she can't. Simply destroying this list does not redeem her.
It was her attempt at a derailment arc. I don't know. I want to make a joke here about it, but whatever.
No, it was certainly an attempt, but it was a failed attempt.
Yeah. I mean, this is stuff that turns people off from writing. If someone actually read this and believed this is what they had to do. This is the kind of
stuff that turns people off from reading or watching television shows.
Well, no, following rules like this is what does that. But if someone read this and actually took it to heart that, this is the way I have to write, it would probably turn a lot of people off of wanting to write.
It would turn people into schizophrenic, nonsensical puddles of pandering is what it would do.
Yeah. Number 30, choose whether you're a comedy or drama at the start and stick to it. Don't make a comedy and turn it into a drama later on. That just annoys people. Again, I'm just going to say the word Steins Gate, and we can move on from that one. Number 31, go ahead and give it a read.
World building is like salt. A pinch can make it better. 10 cups of it will not.
Do I even need to explain the problem with that sentiment?
Too much of anything too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Well, it's how long is your story?
And a little bit of a bad thing is still a bad thing. World building can be done well and it can be done poorly. And a pinch of good world building would make a thing better. 10 cups of good world building? Well, it's still good world building, but at that point, this is the kind of advice that doesn't say anything because it's so blatantly obvious.
Well, it's not just that. It's the kind of advice that comes from someone who doesn't understand there's more than one type of audience. I mean, some people love the really in-depth world building of a very long fantasy series, which you could argue is 10 cups of world building.
Right.
And there's also truth to a pinch can make it better. Like there's a lot of truth to a pinch of world building. Imagine a pinch of really bad.
Imagine a pinch of really bad world building is my counter.
Yes, you can totally add tarragon to
for instance, she just said that if your only character with ethnic background X follows X stereotype, you're a huge turd. But creating a character that follows, that is a of ethnic type X and follows stereotype X is a pinch of world building. And so once again, she contradicts her own advice.
I don't think that's going to stop.
No, it's not going to stop. It will never stop until we're dead.
Yeah. Number 32, characters should always come before anything else. But she has clearly indicated, again, that putting characters in certain situations makes you a huge turd.
Yeah.
So having the white character have a redemption arc or whatever from whatever angsty villainy thing or whatever he was doing.
Right.
That. Well, I mean, if the character should come first, then that shouldn't be a problem. But you've already said that that's a problem. So I would say that character building is important, but there's plenty of stories where they don't really build the characters. They just tell you the story. And I mean, we went through some Grimm's fairy tales talking about this very aspect. And we talked about how there's hard sci-fi stories out there where they don't really have to build the characters. You just have to know what they're there for and how the story unfolds. We kind of talked about how there wasn't really that much character building in the movie Alien, but what little there was enough so that it could drive the story forward.
Right.
Number 33. The protagonist should be a protagonist, not just a vessel for the antagonist to hog the story. If you're going to make the villain protagonist, just open with that. I'm not so sure I understand what her exact gripe is here.
Well,
it would seem to me, if the villain's a protagonist, the villain's the protagonist. But
no. So I think this is aping off of some other quote unquote writing advice, which is that the first character introduced must be the protagonist.
That's not true.
That I agree with you, but that's what I've heard people say.
I mean, there are rules that you can follow like that. There's a whole thing in Umineko about the rules of detective stories, but then they talk about multiple different rules of detective stories.
Right. No, I think this is just someone taking bad advice and spinning it into a larger spool of bad advice.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that one. It's like
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we wanted to think of a big popular story that violates the protagonist gets introduced first rule, doesn't Star Wars: A New Hope technically introduce Vader before anyone else?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we can safely say he wasn't the protagonist of the story.
I mean, he was certainly an interesting character, but he was a villain, yes. He was an antagonist of A New Hope.
Number 34. Perspective shifts are a staple of storytelling. Having only one perspective isn't a stylistic choice. It's just crap. Okay. Oh, God, I don't even know where to begin with this one. Look. Almost every book I've ever read in my lifetime maintained a pretty steady single perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it was usually... I mean... All of the Nero Wolfe books are from the perspective of Archie Goodwin.
And they're not crap.
And they are definitely not crap.
They are the opposite of crap.
Almost all first-person stories are from the perspective of one character.
Yes.
And the ones I've read that I like, I wouldn't say they're crap because of it. I actually put multiple perspectives in my first-person story just for kicks. And I actually found more people that didn't like it than did. There's a lot of people that hate it when you move perspectives in a story.
Yeah.
But on the same token, I don't see where just having the one perspective is a bad choice. I mean, how else are you going to tell a Nero Wolfe story without having it through the eyes of Archie Goodwin?
Well, you could have done it differently, but it would have been worse for doing so.
Yeah, because it's a formula.
Archie Goodwin is the story.
Yeah. I mean, it is a stylistic choice. It's a formula that the writer used to tell multiple stories with the same characters in the same style, so that anyone who picked up a Nero Wolfe book knew that they were getting a Nero Wolfe story anytime they picked it up, and there was a reason to buy the next one every single time, because they were all written well. And
let's be clear, popularity aside, they were also heralded as very good mystery stories from a variety of knowledgeable people. I actually take quite a bit of umbrage to someone saying that, to someone creating a rule or tip that declares all of the Nero Wolfe books to be crap. That is actually, like, I'm actually a little angry. Like I'm actually quite furious. Yeah, this is really bad.
It's much more than just a defect in her training.
No, it's a persecution complex.
It actually is, isn't it? Well, that's our in-joke for today. None of you are going to understand where we're coming from if you haven't seen the series Nero Wolfe, but I hope some of you have.
It's The Silent Speaker. Go read The Silent Speaker by Rex Stout. It's a fantastic book. Or go watch the TV show version of it from A&E. They're both fantastic.
Yes.
We're at almost an hour and a half. We're a third of the way through. We're not going to make it to 50 without making this like a 2.5 hour nonsensical monster.
All right, then let's do 35, and we'll call it quits there. And if we decide to go on from there, we can do that another time. I can see pluses
and minuses for it, unlike Lily Orchard, who can only see minuses from certain things.
Yeah.
We'll discuss it, and we'll come to a conclusion. And maybe you guys will get another episode or two of this. But, wow, this is really bad advice.
Yeah. Number 35. If you're making a cartoon, hire writers. Don't just have your storyboarders write the story. That's not what they're there for. Artists draw, writers write. Artists cannot just take over for the writers on a whim. I draw comics. I am a writer, but I draw comics. I will admit I can't draw, but I've met people who can do both and do it very well.
Sure.
And I've met storyboarders who storyboard because they have a story they want to tell in animation form, but they also wrote the story.
No, but like, think about what else this attacks, right? This attacks actors ad-libbing. This attacks so many things that sometimes, not always, but sometimes create excellent outputs.
Well, I'm confused. I'm confused because most people that make cartoons, they aren't writers. They are artists, and they say, "Oh, I want to make a cartoon," and so they come up with some story for the cartoon.
Right. I'm also thinking of people who are like writer artists for like a comic. Like, let's pick someone unpopular. Like, let's say Bill Watterson.
I don't know who that is, but I'll run with it.
Have you ever heard of Calvin and Hobbes?
Yes.
That's Bill Watterson.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I got his name right. I guess I could be wrong, but
we'll say it's Bill Watterson for now. We can always lie later and say that we were joking.
But this advice basically says that Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes comic was bad because it didn't hire a separate writer versus cartoonist. I want the entire audience to sit back for a moment, close your eyes, and think about someone like Lily Orchard from her faux ivory tower on Twitter, sitting back and saying smugly, with that smug, idiotic smile on her face, that smug 75 IQ smile on her face, Calvin and Hobbes is bad. And I just, if you visualize that correctly, you'll realize that this person has nothing to offer to humanity.
I mean, we can pretty much determine that this person lacks creativity in any abundance just from this one. I mean, I simultaneously cannot draw, but I also make cartoons. I animate things. You are not limited to what you can and can't do based on, the one thing you chose to be really good at. I mean, nobody's going to hire me to animate a cartoon for them based on my ability, but I can do that myself and put it out there for people to see. And Lily Orchard has no power to stop me. So I don't understand where this idea is that, no, you shouldn't do the thing that you want to do.
And imagine, for instance, that there's something in the script that's self-contradictory, right? A storyboarder, in the process of storyboarding, could be going from the script and drawing out their little storyboard sketches, and they could say, wait, this doesn't make sense. We need to fix this. This is entirely a reasonable proposition, an entirely reasonable scenario of something that could happen.
Yeah, and not only that, but a storyboard, you might run into a problem. I'm putting a big hypothetical out there. I can't think of any examples of this, but maybe there's a reason that something can't be drawn the way someone has it written. Like, I'll give you an example. I do a joke in a couple of my stories where someone's response to something is just an exclamation point in quotes, and then the next character will say, "How did you do that?" And they'll be like, "What?" And be like, that thing you did where you just went, and then I'll put the exclamation in quotes like that.
Right.
There's no way to verbalize that. So you wouldn't be able to put that in a story where you had like people acting it out. Like you couldn't do that joke on a screen with that. You would have to actually, like draw the exclamation on the screen, and it wouldn't be as funny because it looks funny as you're reading it, and you're like, oh, this person is doing something, making some sound because it's a quote.
Right.
But there's actually nothing there that you can physically do with that in the real world that will match the emphasis that the joke has versus trying to represent it in another medium. So the storyboarder might come across that and be like, we can't do that. We have to abridge that part.
Right.
Or we have to insert another joke.
Or we need to come up with it. There might be a creative person somewhere who comes up with a visually creative and fun way to do that. Right? Like there might, Well,
I imagine that like a character would react to something like with a face fault, like some kind of like anime style face fault, where their head kind of just rolls off of their body.
Well,
and then they pick it. Simple... No, they pick it up and put it back on their body. And whereas normally the characters would just run with it, like that didn't really happen. That was just there for the gag. A character would be like, "How did you do that? That thing where your head just rolled off your body." There's probably some more clever
I'm imagining
way to do
something
it,
even more subdued than that. Like imagine that just like a red exclamation point animates above their head for a second.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Wait, how did you do that? Do what?" And you could play it off that way too. Like
it pops up over the other character's head. The thing is, though, it's not the same joke at that point, because that's what I mean is like in the book, clearly some kind of sound or something that can be put in quotes exists there.
Well, it depends on how you're reading that story, right?
Sure. I mean, but that's the way I wrote it. That was the intended way to perceive it. If it's not perceived that way, then I actually don't know what someone might perceive it as, but...
Right, that's the point, is that it's hard to perceive.
The point is that it wouldn't be the same joke if you did it real visually
as an author, you don't
way.
As an author, you don't have the authority to demand that everyone take a joke the same way that you intended it.
Yeah, but my point is that someone could be like, well, how do we do this joke? We have to change something, and it might be someone else's job to come up with that, not the writers.
Right. Okay.
So that's Lily Orchard's first 35 rules to sniff by.
And 12 of them were nonsensical diversity pandering.
Yeah, I mean, summing up, don't try to do Avatar, but do try to do Friends. Don't put any black people in your stories. I'm pretty sure that's what that rule meant.
Yeah.
10 cups of salt is not as good as a pinch. And
yes.
If you're writing comedy, make sure it stays comedy. And if you're writing drama, make sure it stays drama. You're not allowed to mix the two at any point whatsoever.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to introduce a story with a light air and have it move on to darker things.
Nope.
So throw all your Lovecraft away. You're not allowed to have any of that. Higurashi, if you're a Higurashi fan, that's out the window. I got to toss Steins Gate out too. Pretty much the majority of Japanese visual or light novels and all visual novels probably. And my God, how much of this does a single Japanese visual novel break? I mean, it already starts with people in high school who are probably shown in outfits that are slightly more revealing than your average Japanese high school. And they probably all have some kind of relationship potential in the story somewhere. I mean, that's like 6 of the rules right off the bat that we're we're already breaking.
Or would likely to be broken, at least.
I don't know. I'm cool with it. If there's a group of
but I mean,
people like this that
visual novels are such a niche thing anyway that like we can actually bring like real books and movies and like things that have wide reach that break these rules with abandon.
Yes. I thought you were going to follow up with an example.
No. I mean, I've already given several, right? Like we don't need to go all the way to, Ranma 1/2 to come up with examples of these things being broken. Because the thing about referring to visual novels or Ranma 1/2 is that a lot of people are just going to say like, well, those are crap media for such and such and such. Like we could point to like Star Wars, which violates. Which violates some of these rules already. Oh no, oh goodness, that the horrible story of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah,
I'm not a huge Final Fantasy VII fan, but I'm pretty close to alone in that perspective. Like world building is like salt. A pinch makes it better, and 10 cups will not. Well, it certainly depends on the quality of the world building. And I don't trust someone like Lily Orchard to actually do good world building. And so I feel like a pinch of her world building will still be bad compared to none.
And I wouldn't even want to see what 10 cups of world building is like, because I feel like it would read a lot like this list.
Imagine a giant, flowing, boiling pool of diarrhea.
Stomping on your face forever.
Yes, forever. Thanks, Orwell.
A frozen boot of diarrhea. All right.
So we may or may not be back to this. We'll have to figure it out. But it's pretty clear that there's a good reason why she deleted all of this stuff, and it's it's pretty clear that there's a very good reason why she got pushback from this nonsense as well. This is bad. In almost every rule is horrible, and the ones that aren't horrible. We had
really
to really
helpful.
Work to make them not horrible.
I mean, there's no actual writing advice here.
So far, not really. I mean, there's a little bit of writing advice, but it's mostly like, this is the kind of thing I like, and therefore you should do the things I like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just not. It's not effective in many genres for many authors making many different types of stories. The utopianism nonsense is especially grating because it's like there's an entire genre of true crime books that are based on people doing horrible things and pacing out that narrative in a way that is interesting for people to read. And I guess that's not technically fiction, but at the same time, it is writing, and it's incredibly popular writing because people find a morbid interest in figuring out how some mass murderer decided to try to justify or hide or, legally defend himself from the charge of being a mass murderer.
Yeah.
Like this is all incredibly confining at best.
I don't think that I'm really off on the suggestion that perhaps she doesn't know that there's different kinds of audiences. I mean,
It's
everything
possible.
in here reads like she believes that there's only one audience that you should be writing for.
And that is her.
Yes.
All right. Wordy Pair, episode talking about this 4-year-old deleted Twitter series of posts.
Boy, were we scraping the barrel.
We kind of were.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For some reason, this showed up in like a feed or something of stuff I was looking at this week. And I didn't know it was 4 years old until we looked it up today. So, I don't know.
Even so, it's one of them things, you come across it, it kind of mildly enrages you, and you feel like talking about it just to get it off your chest. That's kind of how I was feeling about it.
And also to counter a lot of the stupid statements that are being made here. Because, like, people, like, without thinking, make these, like, broad generalizations and broad proscriptions about what should and shouldn't go into quote-unquote good writing. And it's always so painful to watch. It's like a 2-year-old eating a copy of Shakespeare. And
it's not as charming.
No, it's not as charming, and it's I don't know.
But it definitely has a little more drool.
Yeah, but at the same time, you like want to stop them, and you want to be like, no, don't do that. You're gonna hurt yourself or something. And like, there's this weird, I don't know. It's complicated, unlike Lily Orchard's writing.
Well, I mean, it's got a pinch of complication.
A pinch, but not 10 cups.
Yeah.
All right. Wordy pair, talking about bad writing advice. I hope you guys enjoyed this.
We decided to talk about bad writing advice instead of giving it this week.
Yeah, that's well, it's a change of pace, right? Just gotta shake things up every now and again. So, as always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And the Wordy pair will see you next week with something. We'll have something for you.
It's actually in our tagline.
Is it?
Yeah. It's in our opening. We got something for you.
My God, you're right.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.